So I'm just going to kind of move through these different elements of what I think are quite important pillars to wildlife friendly food growing. So the biggest question to start with, I guess, I don't know if anyone has explored or interested in, deep dived in soil and soil health.
I read a fab book about fungi by Merlin Shelby.
Oh yes.
Have you heard about it? I can't remember what it's called, but it's a fantastic.
Entangled Life.
And that talks about fungi and soil, and you'll never think of it quite the same way again. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's fab.
Yeah.
You know, if you can get hold of that book and read it, it's really, really good. So,
It's really changed, I think, the sort of public discourse around soil health, hasn't
Yeah.
it? It has been quite kind of transformative, really, in the way that it's made it very it's kind of that pop culture, right? Of like making it possible for people. Yeah.
There's also George Monbiot's book Regenesis. I don't know if you've read that, but he just said that he spent hours like immersed in soil, and it just completely changed his view of biodiversity in soil and what that means. So that's another good open your eyes to soil book.
Yeah, Regenesis is a good one. I mean, I actually had to skip the first third of it because it was just so depressing. You know, and it's a lot of stuff that, especially when you're in this world, I felt like I'd heard it 1,000 times, and I was like, I just can't do it again. But I think that's Monbiot's general approach, is that he is it's quite hard hitting. Let's strip this back. I mean, the soil ultimately is a huge part of it. It's made up of its mineral bodies. So yeah, we've got the sand particles, which are the bigger pieces, the silt, and then the clay, which is the tiny, smallest mineral size. And then we've got the organic matter, which is actually, surprisingly, a tiny part of it. And air and water takes over a huge proportion of the composite of soil, which is why we talk a lot about compaction and water logging and all that. It's essential that you keep your soil kind of aerated, and that's why I'm always saying to people, don't walk on the beds, because we work so hard keeping our soil in that structure and that tilt that you need to grow. And as soon as you start trampling on it, the air pockets get compressed, and then it's just. And I always find this sort of cross section really interesting, that effectively we grow all of our food crops around the world in the first sort of 6 inches of soil. I don't know if anyone remembers, over in Stokes Croft they had for a while a big board that was we have 100 harvests left because of soil degradation around the world, and then every year it was counting down. We've got 99, we've got 98, and actually in the end I think someone took it down because it was just too much, So yeah, whatever we can do in our ways, in our community ways, to look after soil, and always start with soil health, because that's what then you grow healthy plants out of healthy soil. I'll just read these out if you can't read them. A teaspoon of soil contains many kilometres of fungal hyphae, so that's the mycelial network. A gram of soil can contain up to 10 billion bacteria cells, and a square metre of garden soil can contain over 300 worms. So something for a long time that we have culturally sort of seen as inanimate, it's just soil, nothing's happening under there. We're only, it is happening, the transition is happening around acknowledging the richness and the life that is in soil. I just wanted to sort of introduce this idea of trophic levels, which are kind of the different stages. It gets more sort of complicated. So say the first trophic level is a plant, and then all the insects and invertebrates and animals that rely on that plant becomes increasingly more complicated as you go up that food chain. And that nothing's ever structured. We might have this idea of how things are interrelated, but the earthworm is reliant on this bacteria, which is in nice diagram to kind of think about that food web. And then as an extension of that, the sort of soil and plant interactions, which Merlin Sheldrake in that book goes into quite a lot, the way in which we're now we're understanding that fungal hyphae, you know, kind of grow into the plant root, and there's this incredibly direct relationship between the fungal mycelium and the plant root, and how symbiotic that relationship is, that exchange of minerals and sugars and to kind of benefit both, you know. And so that there isn't that boundary. It's not like soil starts here, terrestrial life starts here. I mean, there is, but it's also much more merged. And has anyone heard of succession? Ecological succession, yeah. So just to introduce that as a really key ecological principle. Yeah, so you have a kind of a disturbance in some way, that might be fire, might be landslide, that effectively clears a whole area back to kind of like stage one in ecological development. And then you have your quick growing sort of plaster plants, you know, that come along just to basically heal the earth. As far as nature's concerned, bare soil is a wound, and she's keen to like cover that as quickly as possible. And these pioneering species become then more kind of complex, right? In up to 4 years after that incident, and then effectively it is driving itself towards this climax community, which I've mentioned before. So as food growers, we're kind of in this section all the time. We're pulling it back to this point where we can still have access to the soil, and the ground can be clear enough so that things aren't out competing our annual crops. But I think it's just really worthwhile bearing that in mind, that it's just a different approach, I guess. Like, this is what nature is driving towards, and we're borrowing this bit of soil for the time being. And it's not that, like, you know, it's not that she's out to get you. You know, it's not like nature be human. It's just that we are part of cultivating and part of farming is working to like keep in this place. Digging more into the root, the kind of like roots conversation, and that relationship with mycelium and roots, and how important it is to keep ground covered as much as possible year round. So it's a nice photograph of living pathways. They've got here their kind of main crops, and then in between a sort of grass clovery mix that keeps the soil covered, so you've got less evaporation, the water stays in the soil for longer, less competition with weeds because you're kind of choosing what plants grow there, and then if you've got a healthy fungally rich soil that hasn't been sprayed with chemicals and so on, and you've allowed that soil health that soil life to thrive, the root surface actually, so it increases active root surface for nutrient acquisition up to 700 times, which is quite mind-blowing.